Welcome to Stories Without Borders, the podcast. I'm your host, Hollyn. Here we interview people who use the power of stories in service to promote connection, empathy, and understanding around the world. You can learn more online at storieswithoutborders.org or follow us on Instagram and YouTube at stories_without-borders. Thanks for listening. Here's today's episode. Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming to the very first live taping of Stories Without Borders, the podcast. It means so much to me that you guys are all here. Before I introduce my lovely guests, I'd love to give you all just a little bit more context and information about my organization, Stories Without Borders. So Stories Without Borders, I founded it in 2023, and it's a student-led organization that uses the power of stories in service to promote connection, empathy, and understanding around the world. And we've done a lot of service projects, including supporting fire relief in Altadena. We've worked with kids, refugee and migrant children in Tijuana to cultivate a love of learning. And we've also provided environmentally focused curriculum to foster youth in Taipei. And a lot of these service projects are inspired by real life stories like books, movies, etc. And we take the content that's in the stories and we apply it into our service projects. And that's how using the power of stories comes into the service projects. And so this offshoot, this podcast, is the branch off of the Stories Without Borders organization, where I interview lovely authors, artists, activists, entrepreneurs, people who use the power of stories in service to promote connection, empathy, and understanding around the world. And what better guest to speak with today than New York Times bestselling author, filmmaker, and tech leader, Abigail Hing Wen. Some of you here may know Abigail from her New York Times bestselling trilogy, the Love Boat Taipei series. She also wrote and produced the Paramount Plus adaptation, Love in Taipei, which stars Ashley Liao from the Hunger Games franchise and Ross Butler from Shazam. Her fourth novel, Kiss Its Codes and Conspiracies, is a national bestseller and an Amazon editor's pick. Her fifth novel, The Vale, is her debut middle grade novel, which is super exciting. And she also wrote and directed the short film, The Vale Origins, which is a prequel to The Vale. So thank you so much, Abigail. I'm so excited to be able to celebrate your debut in the middle grade world and also just this film and just to be here and talk about your work.
Oh, wow. Well, oh, Hollyn, that is amazing. I am so honored to be a part of your inaugural kickoff for this incredible podcast.
Thank you so much.
Fun fact, we actually did a little interview together in secret while I was filming The Vale Origins.
She was my very first podcast guest, which is released today. So go check it out after this event.
Yeah.
So why don't we get started? I'm just going to give you guys a little information about The Vale. So The Vale is about 13-year-old Bran Lee, who has spent the majority of his life creating and developing this AI-generated world. And he loves spending time in The Vale. He's created friends and quests and things for him to do. And this Vale is sort of an escape for him from the real world, where his parents are struggling financially. And he tries to spend as much time in The Vale to not have to interact with the real world and the problems in the real world. But then slowly, weird things start happening in the Vale. Like the sunlight is weird. There's things that go missing. And so Bran has to work against the clock to fix the Vale before it's too late. So I'd love to know, what was the inspiration behind the Vale?
So I actually wrote The Vale in 2015, so 10 years ago. It was my creative thesis in my MFA program at Vermont College of Fine Arts, and I was working at the same time in tech. I was working in the heart of the AI revolution in Silicon Valley, and I saw this really powerful technology that was just seeping into all aspects of our lives, and nobody knew about it, nobody outside the Valley. I remember there was one year I was working in venture capital, and there were 2,000 AI startups that year pumping this technology into the world.
Wow.
And it's a multi-use technology, so something that seems as innocuous as like lip reading technology that's used for the hearing impaired could be weaponized. So I can hear what you guys are whispering about at the very back of this room. And there was no one thinking about this from an ethics or safety standpoint. And so I was a lawyer in that space. And then eventually I moved into our AI products group. But I wanted to democratize access. I wanted to democratize information about the technology in a way that was accessible and fun and engaging. And The Vale sort of just came together partly because it's a lot of things I love. It's a family story, so it's a family that's struggling together, that's creating together, and saving each other, similar to like A Wrinkle in Time, which is one of my favorites. It's also a fantasy. I love Narnia. There's so many fantasy worlds that I love. And so the idea of a kid that's able to use these powerful technologies and build his own fantasy world was really appealing to me. And so that's really the heart of the story.
And The Vale, like I've said before, is your very first middle grade book. All of your books, the Love Boat series, Kisses, Codes, and Conspiracies, they've all been YA books. So what made you want to write a middle grade book?
So I actually think middle grade's my first love.
Really?
My very first novel that I wrote, there's no overnight success. I wrote now, I think it's been 18 years since I first started writing that novel. It was a middle grade fantasy. And that was when I realized that there was something here. I didn't even know I was creative at that time. But I had this idea for a middle grade fantasy about a boy with a sword who goes into another world through a portal, a very kind of derivative. But the world is cool. And my agent today actually still wants me to fix that story and put it out in the world. But it was a middle grade. And I see pieces of it now in The Vale today. But I was even thinking back, because I've gotten this question a lot now, like, why did you pivot from YA to middle grade? Like, well, actually, I first started writing middle grade. And on my honeymoon, I brought the Chronicles of Narnia to read to my husband who had never read them. So I think it just shows, like, it's always just been in my DNA.
And what were some of the similarities and differences between writing YA and middle grade? Like, how does the process differ?
Yeah, I don't know that it's that different. Young adults, actually, one of the things I don't love about young adult is that right now it wants to be angsty. And I don't necessarily want to, like, always do that. I think there's a place for it, and definitely in, like, the Lobo Taipei series. My girl is trying to figure out her place in the world between East and West, and how does she pursue her passions while honoring her family. And there is angst around that, and relationships and romantic relationships and stuff. But I feel like with middle grade, there's a purity, and there can be adventure, and the kids are heroes, which is, I think, my favorite part. I used to tell stories when I was little to my brother and sister about worlds without adults where the kids were the heroes. And I love that, because I think kids are so capable of many things. And if I'm able to help them believe in themselves a little more, I think that's really all I want to accomplish.
That's beautiful. And I feel like a lot of times kids are underestimated. I think even Bran in the book, he is underestimated time and time again. And that's one of the challenges he has to overcome, where his parents underestimate him, and later on other figures in his life underestimate him. And one of the things I really enjoyed about The Vale, and I thought was really unique, is that there was almost two different timelines. It's a split point of view. There's one is Bran's point of view, and the other is the AI generated, his little AI friend that he made called Nomely. And Bran's timeline takes place partially in the real world, partially in the Vale, and Nomely's timeline basically just takes place in the Vale. And so what was the process of creating those two different timelines, and how did you merge them together in a way that made sense with the story?
Yeah, so that was definitely one of the hardest parts of writing this book.
Right.
It's a dual narrative, as you mentioned. It goes back and forth, it's not a typical dual narrative in the sense that instead of just like two different points of view every chapter, it goes back and forth between the live action real world and then the Book of Elf. And the Book of Elf begins in Genesis and it ends in Revelations. And so, and there's a little trick to it at the end that you realize later. So I think it was that interweaving that was the hardest part for me, because they were two different timelines and two different stories, and the stories weren't necessarily interconnected.
Right.
And so that was part of my exercise as I revised. And I'm a writer by revision. Like, I don't actually know how many drafts I've done of The Vale, but my Love Boat Taipei book published at version 31. And I think The Vale must be more than that, because it's been 10 years that I've been thinking about it. I did set it aside for many years while I wrote the other novels. But I think figuring out how the two worlds were going to be linked was probably the final thing that I had to figure out to really make the book work. And so there's dragonflies. There are a lot of Easter eggs that appear throughout. There's dragonflies that appear in both worlds. There are analogs between the characters. And actually, the fun thing about working in this book with so many mediums is that I get to like see different artists will point out different things. So for example, I just directed the audiobook narration with Matt Yang King, who is fabulous. He's been the voice for Avatar: The Last Airbender and Elemental, and he's so good with so many voices. And he, but he had to ask me like, oh, is this character like this character? And I don't want to spoil it all, but like Nomely is a little bit like Bran's analog,
right?
But there are other analogs, and so he actually matched the voices. But one is in a British accent for the Book of Elf, and the other in the real world is in an American accent, which is where our boy lives.
That's amazing. And The Vale is a very tech-forward world. It's filled to the brim with these intricate descriptions and intricate technologies of AI and even just robots in general, which I guess are technically AI. And I know that you were a tech leader and you are still a tech leader. And so I'm wondering, how did your experience in working in Silicon Valley influence your work? Like, how did you apply that knowledge into this story?
So the last thing I did in Silicon Valley before I left to do content creation full-time was I actually hosted the podcast for Intel Corporation. It was their official podcast on AI. And my goal in rebranding that podcast for them was like very much the same, of democratizing access to the technologies. So I think that is kind of my secret weapon, is I can take the complicated technologies and make analogies out of them. So one of the analogies, and one of my hopes actually is for my young readers and the young at heart who read the book, is that after you read the book, you will have an intuitive understanding of how AI generation works, just by living it with Bran. And the Vale itself is trained on a corpus of books, in the way that I think most people now are familiar with how ChatGPT and these other large language models have been trained. The Vale's been trained on books, but it's been trained in a clean way. So it's clean AI. It's a term I'm trying to coin with this book. It's trained on works that are not in the copyright anymore. So the Brothers Grimm, 1001 Arabian Nights, The Magic Paintbrush, which is a Chinese story where everything you paint comes to life. And that's very much the Vale. And there's an analogy in the book that describes it like a carnation drinking colored water. The carnation turns the color of the water that it's sitting in, and that's kind of like the Vale. It's absorbing and learning from all these things that have been inputted into it, not just the stories, but also the drawings that the Lee family have put into the Vale, and then the interactions with Bran himself. For better or worse, Bran has been training the Vale personally for 7 years by interacting and playing in this world. And so, as you mentioned, part of his journey is learning to not only live in the Vale.
Yeah. Bran's parents are always very invested in their work. And how do you think that has shaped Bran's sort of experience with the real world and his social development?
Yeah, that's it's a great question. And I was telling Hollyn when we were in the green room, like, the book's just come out and I am on tour, so I keep leaving every city. So I actually never get to talk to anyone who's read the book. But Hollyn read it a while ago. So this is a really rewarding conversation for me. One of the fun things about the dynamic in the family is mom and dad love each other so much. They're really close. They're soulmates. And because they're such soulmates, Bran actually feels a little left out. And not to, I do think that's actually the right model for like a family, for the parents to have a strong bond. But partly why Bran wants a little brother so badly is so that he has someone to relate to at his level, someone who can understand what it is to be the parents of geniuses that are so brilliant that can create things like the Vale technology, but are so absent-minded that they forget to go to parent-teacher conferences or schedule play dates. And so that's why he really longs for someone he can relate to, and he finds that initially in the Vale. For many years, that's right. It's Gnomely, it's his elves, it's this world that he's building.
How do the different characters symbolize different aspects of Bran's life? Like, what does the chief of the elves symbolize? What does Gnomely's little sister symbolize?
Oh, gosh, I don't want to spoil anything. Gnomely has a little sister. Her name is Mei. And that was fun.
Does it Mei mean little sister in Chinese?
It does mean little sister in Chinese. So that was partly, like my way of, Bran is a Asian kid, as you are.
Yes.
And that's partly like, what does that mean that he's a Asian kid? It means like he just brings inputs from all his cultures. So so there are things like the magic paintbrush, and that his little sister in the Vale is called Mei. But the chief, there is I don't think it's a spoiler to say the chief has some qualities of Bran's father. Yes. Even though the chief is the father of the love interest in the Vale. Right. But there's something about him where he lacks confidence to stand up against people that are trying, that are opposing him. And so I think that's true for all art. Our art reflects who we are. And for Bran, the Vale is Bran's. So it reflects the world that he knows and who he is.
And speaking of the two different varying perspectives, how does the diction differ in the Book of Elf and Bran's perspective?
So the Book of Elf the idea is that it's like a traditional old fantasy novel, and so there's a bit of like more of a high language. There's quirky language that I keep getting feedback on this one line. This is a description of the Vale that people keep saying I should take it out, but I just couldn't take it out. So Gnomely waves to his fellow elves. They were always great fun in their many-colored smocks, taunting the plants, which were clever with their fingers and toes, but never went anywhere. Their huts were scattered like wild mushrooms, their young ones ran about without a stitch of clothing, and the ambitious goals that the chief rolled out each morning, "Gather ye all fruits of the forest," he would roar from the square, always went unmet by nightfall. The elves had other games to play, and the goal, to be honest, was not achievable in a forest of 1,000 acres. this was the Vale. So I did modify that language. Like, it was very like flowery at one point, and so I modified it to make it plainer, but it's still there, and I think it still confuses some people, but I wanted to keep it because I felt like it captured the whimsy of this world.
In addition to publishing and writing The Vale, you also wrote and directed the short film The Vale Origins, the prequel to The Vale. What was it like directing a film for the first time?
So it was such a wonderful fit that I never expected. And I think the best part of doing a film is that you have this amazing community of people. And being a writer, being an author, it's just you and the page, and then you've got your editor. But it can be very solitary. And I love that filmmaking is a team sport. And then being a director, too, it's hard to actually become an expert at being a director because you can't practice. It's like you don't make that many movies. But you end up becoming a layperson in a lot of other art mediums. And so getting to work on the production design, and then working with our DP on cameras, and then our animation team, like thinking about all the things that go into that. And then even with my illustrators for the novel itself has 40 illustrations. So I art directed that, and then working with my audiobook narrator.
That's amazing.
And so you end up exercising all these different muscles, and then it all has to come together into one final product. And that, I think, is like, it's like nothing I've ever experienced. And I remember Julie's one of my executive producers. She's Ashley Liao's mom, who's my star for Love and Taipei, and she's here. We were talking, and Julie's like, it's like an addiction. Like, once you start doing it, you can't stop because it's incredible. It's so rewarding.
Yeah, and the Vale Origins, it's a multimedia format that transitions back and forth so smoothly. And so what was it like just incorporating the live action with the animation, and how'd you go from the real world to the Vale? Like, how did those transitions work?
Oh yeah, so that was definitely part of the fun of it. And I'm sorry for those most of you haven't seen it yet. We can't screen it publicly yet because we are taking it through the film festival circuit, but we do have a trailer that's partly released on Instagram, and I will be releasing the trailer very soon on YouTube, so you'll get a taste of it there at least. But part of the reason why I wanted to do the short was as a proof of concept for what a feature-length film could be. And even my own agents were scared, like, oh, that's going to be a very expensive film because it's not just animation, but the Silicon Valley piece is expensive. But for me, like, building the Silicon Valley part was free because I just sourced materials from everyone I knew in the Valley. So there's a big inventors lab, all free materials, and then I worked with my production designer to put that together. But the transitions, as you were asking about, the transitions between the real world and the virtual reality world were the fun part. It was we had fun, like, kind of coming up with creative ways to move in and out of the worlds so that it felt seamless, but it was also, I wanted it to be intriguing so that we felt like we were getting glimpses of the Vale. We don't know what it is. Is it Bran's imagination or is it real? But it definitely added a lot of complication to the short, but in a way that I think the whole team enjoyed. I think that's what attracted so many wonderful people to it, is that it was just a really fun puzzle.
And it's very unique too. I don't think I've seen that many films that have just done such a seamless transition between animation and film.
Yeah, and there were definitely a lot of iterations to get there. Yeah. And I know at one point someone pitched, like, well, maybe we should just not go back and forth between the worlds, just have it be a straightforward, like, we're in the real world, then we go into the Vale. And I felt like it would be less interesting overall.
Yeah, the thing that drew me into the Vale so much was the difference between the Book of Elf and Bran's perspective, and I feel like not reflecting that in the film wouldn't do justice to the book. So I'm really glad you guys decided to do that.
I'm glad that we made it work.
Yeah. In the film industry, besides writing and directing the short film, you've also produced Love and Taipei. And so I'm wondering, what were some of the differences between the process of being a producer and being a director and a writer?
So for Love and Taipei was my very first film, and I was an executive producer on it.
Right.
So I basically wanted to learn the ropes from start to finish. And, being a good student, I interviewed every single person that I could reach to find out, like, how do you do your job? What what is this about? And
it's great.
When you see all those credits rolling at the end of a film, there are 300 names, and they really all do something for the film. They all touch and shape the film in some way, and they leave their creative mark. And I think that's also the other miracle of a film, like all these creatives, like, working towards this one final thing. But so as an executive producer for Love and Taipei, the first step was, well, I guess as the author of the novel, the first step was hearing from studios and producers. Like, they were asking me, do you see this as a TV series or a film? Do you see this as a full-blown musical, since there was a big dance element to it? Or are we going to just lean into the dance elements? So it ended up being a film that we leaned into the dance elements. And then from there, we had to find a screenwriter. And so we auditioned a bunch, we found one that was great. And then I went back and forth with them on the script until that was greenlit. And then we brought on the director, and then we cast, which was fun. Which is the part that everyone, I think, gets excited about. But then we filmed at the height of pandemic. So that really shaped our project in a different way. We had to go through 2 weeks of quarantine in Taiwan, and Taiwan is very strict.
Yeah.
Yes, very strict. And we had 2 sets of COVID protocols. We joked that we were the safest set on the planet because we had American protocols and Taiwanese ones. We were COVID testing every 3 days, and we all had to wear masks that were changed like every couple hours. So that in itself was its own experience. But strangely enough, because of COVID, it in some ways it protected the creatives on the project because we were the only ones there. Like, it's very hard to do 2 weeks of quarantine. Most people cannot do it. But I think as a writer, it was a writing retreat for me. So I've actually done it twice, and I love it.
Awesome.
Like, nobody can reach me. I could just write my books, and they feed me. So, but for most people, it's really hard, and people just can't do it. So we ended up just being us running around on set together in Taiwan and shaping things. And I remember at one point, like, we probably would have been in Video Village normally, but instead we were there. And I remember, like, we were doing the calligraphy scene, and Julie pointed out, they're all holding their calligraphy brush wrong. And we just had the opportunity to say things like that and fix them right on the spot. And so there's a lot of little changes like that we did that I don't think is typical for people in our roles. And so because of that we just learned so much about how to make a movie. And then, of course, there's post-production, which I was less involved with Love and Taipei, but we were very heavily involved with the Vale, because especially with the animation, the live action, people think of animation as post-production, but the animation was like a third of the film. And so we spent a lot of time like in that process for the Vale itself. And then I think producing and directing and writing, to me, I don't actually have these lines that I feel like Hollywood has had traditionally. Even for TV versus film, it doesn't seem that different to me. It's all just story.
Right.
Sometimes you take longer to tell it, you could take shorter to tell it, but every story could be told in different ways.
Right.
And with different tools. So for me, it all blends together. And the goal at the end of the day is to translate the story and the characters into a medium that other people can experience and connect to.
That's awesome. So normally I would ask Abigail some lightning round questions, or my guests some lightning round questions, but I wanted to open it up to you guys if you guys had any questions for Abigail or just in general. First audience question. Seeing your book, Love Boat Taipei, turn into a film, what was the thing that was the most exciting for you, and what was the most difficult for you in that process?
Great question. Most exciting, I think, is to see all these images that were just in my head on a screen. And the things that you can't put in a book as well are like the beauty of Taiwan, the scenery, and the kinetic energy of dance. So those don't appear on page. So I enjoyed how the other medium was able to reflect that. And I loved, again, meeting all the people who were involved. I really connected, especially with my actors on set, with the other folks that were in Taiwan. And what was the hardest part? So, with 300 people on a film, like, it's going to go in its own direction. And I think that's something I came to appreciate over time. Someone described it as like, oh, the film wants to be something, as though the film had its own identity. And there is some truth to that. As the author of the book, you have a little bit more autonomy, but you cede control to 300 people. And everyone brings their own sensibilities, so the actors bring their own interpretation, the director brings his own lens, and then at the end of the day, in the editing room, you have to try to figure out, like, will all these pieces fit together in a cohesive story? So I know that there were a number of fans that were surprised and actually disappointed by the ending of the movie when I'm going to spoil it for you if you haven't seen it yet, because you should have seen it by now.
Cover your ears if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, so she ends up with the other love interest in the movie than she ends up with in the book. So I had a lot of very upset fans, and actually it just released on Netflix worldwide a couple months ago, so I heard from all of the people abroad who didn't know that was the ending. But what I told them, similar to what I said here, like 300 people are making this film, but also the movie ends at the midpoint, like the journey continues in the rest of the trilogy. And so I feel like I'm glad I was able to do that for my readers and my fans who were hurt by that. And to like understand, like, the movie itself is its own thing, and it's amazing to have all these talented people like putting their efforts into creating this world so that so many more people could enjoy it, and so they can enjoy the movie as it is, and then they can still enjoy like the books and the rest of the story simultaneously.
Any other questions? Next audience question. What made you decide to wait so long before publishing The Vale?
I didn't have a choice, actually. My rep at the time said, I don't know what this is. It's a book about AI generation. This is 2015. And she's like, I don't know what this is. I don't know how to place this, so it never saw the light of day. It never went to any publishers. And she was right. I don't think we could have published a book like that back then because really nobody outside Silicon Valley knew. So yeah, it was just too early to publish. And then I forgot about it. I was working on all these other books. And the reason why it came back was after the success of Love Boat Taipei, I was meeting with producers. And one of them was an animation live action hybrid producer at Netflix. And I was really intrigued. I'm like, oh, I have a project like that. And animators will tell you, like Neil Blevins, who's our animation production designer, is here in the audience. And I think, you'd probably agree, like it's very expensive to make animation. And there has to be a good reason why you're doing an animated film. There are films that are animated that don't have to be animated. And they always get challenged for that reason. But I felt like, The Vale, it does really have to be half live action, half animation. I could make it all animation, but you wouldn't get the same effect from that. Like you could do a different quality for the live action world, but it was meant to be this way. And so that's what kind of lit a fire under me to finish the novel. But I actually got the short film going before the novel was even done.
One more question. And the last audience question is, what advice would you give to a new author whose biggest dream is to publish a book and make it into a movie?
So I think, for people who are interested in writing novels, what I learned is that you write what you know and you write what you're the expert in versus I used to think, I went to books to learn things that I didn't know. But when you do it yourself, it's about digging deep and like what are the stories that only you can tell and the unique point of view that only you bring. And that's, I think, how you leave a mark and you stand out. And then how do you make a book into a movie? It's hard. I didn't know until we were done with Love Boat Taipei that it's a miracle to get anything done. But I've been really, really blessed to have so much support from the community. Getting the book onto the bestseller list was huge for the book because it's an Asian American identity story. And so I think that also helped get us all the way to the screen. I had producers already pretty much ready to go before we launched, and they were very proud of that. They said, we liked this book before it was a bestseller. But I knew it would be a long, hard road, and so hitting the bestseller list was actually really important to us strategically, not just for the accolades of it. But you don't have to be a bestseller novel to become a film. So I think it takes time, but you have to find the people who connect with your work, and then you can move it forward from there.
I think we do have some time for a couple of lightning round questions.
Awesome.
So the lightning round questions, what I usually do is I give a quick question, Abigail gives a quick answer, and then I give a quick answer, and then we talk about it and then move on to the next. So the first one is, what is your go-to sushi order?
Ooh, great question. I do love salmon.
Salmon?
Salmon.
Ooh, salmon's good. I like yellowtail or toro.
Oh, toro. Very good too.
Yeah. What is your most controversial hot take about food?
I don't know if this is controversial, but I say it too often. Every time I get dim sum, I tell my kids this is the best part about being Chinese. It's probably very reductionist. Dim sum.
Yeah, so I have a pretty controversial one. So when I have a chocolate chip cookie, I know some people like to dip them in milk. See, I don't like doing that. I like taking a bite out of it, swallowing it, and then washing it down with lemonade. It's something about the sweet and sour that just really goes together for me.
I love that.
Yeah. What is an allergy you would actually be okay with having?
I guess there's Brussels sprouts. I'd be okay with that.
I'm going to go in the same vein, asparagus.
There you go.
If you could choose any character from The Vale and give advice to them, which character would you choose and what advice would you give them?
I think it's the whole Lee family. They're brilliant, they're neurodiverse, they're not comfortable in the real world, and they didn't know how good they were. So, in some ways the whole story is a love letter to people like that, to people like them who don't realize how good you are and don't have the confidence to move forward. And so I want them to have that. And it actually takes their own brilliant creation that reveals that truth to them.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much. And just a quick, before we get to the signings and everything, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Annabelle's book club. They were all so supportive of this idea and of me and of Abigail, and I'm just so grateful to be able to have this event in their beautiful bookstore. Thank you guys again so much. Thanks for listening listening to Stories Without Borders, the podcast. Please rate and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. You can learn more online at storieswithoutborders.org or follow us on Instagram at stories_without-borders. And if you like watching your podcasts, subscribe to our YouTube channel at stories_without-borders. Stories Without Borders, the podcast, is written, hosted, and produced by me, Hollyn Alpert. I also wrote and performed the theme music. Danuta Amato is our sound engineer, audio editor, and videographer. Kennedy Hibbert is our video editor. Thanks to Liberty Yanaga and Langston Williams for production support. See you all next time!